In a peaceful forest under the shade of a crooked oak tree lives a little rabbit named Remy. Though his life may seem simple, it is filled with challenges that require kindness, patience, and hope. When his garden fails and food becomes scarce, Remy doesn't give up. He believes that no matter how poor, there's always room for dreams. One quiet evening, Remy follows a mysterious light deep into the heart of the forest, discovering a hidden tree that promises something magical. Will Remy's kindness lead him to the help he so desperately needs? Or will he find that sometimes the most precious gifts come not from what we seek, but from what we give? Join Remy on an unforgettable journey of hope, kindness, and the magic of the forest. This is a story to fall asleep to. Not far from that quiet corner of the world, beneath a crooked old oak, lived a rabbit named Remy. Remy was neither the largest nor the smallest rabbit in the forest. His fur was a gentle brown, the color of autumn leaves just before they fall, and his eyes held the warmth of amber caught in morning sunlight. Each day began the same way for Remy, with the soft whisper of dawn through his burrow's entrance and the gentle rustle of leaves overhead. His home was modest but comfortable, carved carefully into the earth beneath the oak's protective roots. The walls were lined with soft moss that he had gathered during the spring rains, and in one corner sat a small collection of smooth stones he had found by the forest stream. These stones served no particular purpose other than their quiet beauty, for Remy understood that even the simplest life could hold moments of wonder. Every morning, Remy would emerge from his burrow and tend to his small garden. The patch was no larger than a dinner table, tucked between two fallen logs where the morning sun could reach, but the harsh afternoon heat could not. Here he grew carrots, lettuce, and a few sprigs of mint that filled the air with their sweet fragrance. The work was neither easy nor difficult. It simply was like breathing or the changing of seasons. Remy had learned the rhythms of the forest through careful observation. He knew which berries ripened first in summer, where the clearest water could be found after rain, and how to read the sky for signs of changing weather. The other forest creatures knew him as a quiet neighbor who caused no trouble and offered help when it was needed. The squirrels would sometimes share news of distant parts of the forest, and the blue jay family that nested nearby would warn him of approaching storms. In the evenings, after his simple dinner and the gentle tasks of tending his home, Remy would sit beneath his oak tree and watch the stars emerge one by one. He had taught himself to recognize the patterns they made across the sky, though he had never learned their proper names. To him, they were simply the bright cluster, the long line, and the gentle arc that appeared only in autumn. This peaceful routine had continued for many seasons, through springs that burst with new life, summers that hummed with warm contentment, autumns that painted the world in gold and crimson, and winters that wrapped the forest in hushed silence. Remy had learned to find joy in small things, the taste of fresh morning dew on lettuce leaves, the way sunlight danced through the oak's branches, the soft sound of rain on the earth above his burrow. Yet even in this simple contentment, Remy sometimes felt a stirring in his heart, not of dissatisfaction, but of gentle curiosity about what lay beyond the familiar paths he traveled each day. He wondered about the deeper parts of the forest, where the trees grew so tall their tops disappeared into mist, and about the stories the wind carried from distant places. As the seasons changed, so too did Remy's small world, bringing a challenge that crept in slowly. The trouble began so gradually that Remy almost didn't notice it at first. It was early autumn when he observed that his carrots, usually plump and orange by this time of year, remained thin and pale. The lettuce leaves, which should have been crisp and green, appeared yellowed around the edges. Even his beloved mint seemed to droop with an unexplained weariness. At first, Remy thought perhaps he had been neglectful in his care. He checked the soil with his small paws, finding it neither too dry nor too damp. He examined each plant carefully, looking for signs of the small insects that sometimes cause trouble, but found none. The morning sun still reached his garden at the proper angle, and the afternoon shade still fell, as it always had. Day by day, the situation grew more concerning. The carrots that Remy had counted on for his winter stores remained stubbornly small. The lettuce began to wither despite his careful watering. Even the hardiest plants in his garden seemed to struggle against some invisible affliction. Other forest creatures began to notice Remy's predicament. Old Mrs. Hedgehog, who had lived in the forest longer than anyone could remember, shuffled over one morning to examine the failing garden. She sniffed the soil with her keen nose and shook her head slowly. "The earth is tired, young Remy," she said in her creaky voice. "Sometimes, after many seasons of giving, the soil needs rest and renewal. It happens to the best of gardeners, and there's no shame in it." The wise old hedgehog's words brought some comfort, but they didn't solve Remy's growing problem. As the days shortened and the first hints of winter appeared in the morning air, he realized that his usual stores of food would not last through the cold months ahead. Remy tried not to worry, but as he sat beneath his oak tree each evening, watching the familiar stars emerge, his mind couldn't help but wander to practical concerns. He had always prided himself on his self-sufficiency, on his ability to provide for his simple needs through careful planning and gentle work. Now, for the first time in many seasons, he faced the possibility of genuine hardship. Other rabbits in distant parts of the forest might have panicked or grown bitter at such misfortune, but Remy's gentle nature and steady temperament served him well even in difficulty. Instead of despair, he felt a quiet determination growing within him. He would need to be creative, to look beyond his usual resources, to find new ways to prepare for the winter ahead. He began taking longer walks through the forest, searching for alternative sources of food that he had perhaps overlooked in his years of garden abundance. He found a few patches of wild clover that still held their nutrients, some late blooming flowers whose seeds might sustain him, and bark from certain trees that could provide nourishment in desperate times. But even with these discoveries, Remy knew that the winter would be challenging. As he gathered what food he could find and stored it carefully in his burrow, he often paused in his work to gaze deeper into the forest, toward the mysterious paths he had never explored. Something in those shadowed depths seemed to call to him, though he couldn't say exactly what it was. The other forest creatures, aware of Remy's situation, offered what help they could. The squirrels shared a small portion of their acorn stores, and the jay family brought news of a patch of late berries growing near the old stone bridge. These gestures of kindness warmed Remy's heart, and reminded him that even in difficulty, he was not truly alone. Still, as the nights grew longer, and the first frost appeared on his oak tree's leaves, Remy couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to change in his quiet world. He had faced the prospect of a harsh winter with courage and resourcefulness, but deep in his heart he sensed that this challenge was leading him towards something entirely unexpected. Then one evening, as the sky melted into twilight, something curious caught Remy's eye. It was the kind of evening when autumn shows its most enchanting face. The air held that perfect balance between the warmth of day and the cool promise of night, and the forest seemed to hum with a quiet energy that made even ordinary things appear touched by magic. Remy had finished his simple dinner of wild clover and some of the seeds he had carefully gathered, and now sat beneath his oak tree, as was his custom. The stars were just beginning to appear when Remy noticed something unusual in his peripheral vision. At first, he thought it might be a firefly that had lingered beyond its season, or perhaps the reflection of starlight on a dewdrop. But as he turned his attention toward the phenomenon, he realized it was something altogether different. Deep in the forest, perhaps 100 paces beyond the furthest point Remy had ever explored, a soft light glowed among the trees. It wasn't the harsh brightness of lightning or the flickering orange of fire. Instead, it pulsed with a gentle, pearl-like luminescence that seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the forest itself. Remy sat very still, watching the light with growing fascination. It appeared to move slightly, though whether it was actually moving or simply shifting with the gentle sway of branches, he couldn't tell. The light seemed to call to him without making any sound, drawing his attention as surely as if someone had spoken his name. For a long time, Remy remained beneath his oak tree, considering what he should do. His practical nature suggested that he should observe the phenomenon from a safe distance and wait to see if it appeared again on subsequent nights. Unexplained lights in forests could mean any number of things, and prudence counseled caution. But something deeper than practicality stirred within Remy's heart. Perhaps it was the accumulated effects of his recent troubles, or the way the light seemed to pulse in harmony with some rhythm he felt but couldn't name. Perhaps it was simply that after so many seasons of routine and predictability, his spirit yearned for something genuinely mysterious. As he sat there contemplating, the light seemed to brighten slightly, as if sensing his attention. It pulsed once, twice, 3 times in a pattern that felt almost like a greeting. Despite his naturally cautious disposition, Remy felt an inexplicable sense of invitation emanating from that distant glow. Slowly, Remy rose to his feet and took a tentative step toward the edge of his familiar territory. The light remained steady, neither advancing nor retreating, simply maintaining its gentle presence among the distant trees. Another step, and then another, and Remy found himself walking along a path he had never traveled before. The forest felt different as he moved deeper into its heart. The trees grew taller and their trunks thicker, creating cathedral-like spaces filled with mysterious shadows. The usual sounds of evening creatures seemed muted here, replaced by an almost expectant silence that made every footstep feel significant. Remy paused frequently during his journey, partly to ensure he could find his way back home, but mostly because each step seemed to carry him into increasingly enchanted territory. Moss-covered logs created natural bridges over small streams that sang with voices like tiny bells. Flowers that he had never seen before glowed with their own subtle light, creating a path of gentle illumination that seemed to guide his steps. The mysterious light ahead grew neither brighter nor dimmer as he approached, maintaining its steady, welcoming pulse. It seemed to wait patiently for his arrival, unhurried and serene. With each step, Remy felt his initial nervousness transform into a growing sense of anticipation, as if he were walking towards something he had been meant to find all along. Behind him, his simple burrow and familiar oak tree grew distant, but somehow this didn't frighten him as he thought it might. Instead, he felt as though he were finally answering a question that had been quietly asked of him for many seasons, a question he had never quite heard clearly until this magical evening when a mysterious light chose to reveal itself in the depths of the forest. Guided by soft moonlight and wonder, Remy stepped gently into a clearing unlike any he had ever seen. The source of the mysterious light revealed itself as Remy emerged from between two enormous pine trees into a circular clearing that seemed to exist outside the ordinary rules of the forest. Here, the canopy opened to reveal a perfect circle of star-filled sky, and in the center of this natural amphitheater stood a tree unlike any Remy had ever encountered. The tree was neither particularly tall nor imposing in size, but it possessed a presence that made Remy's breath catch in his throat. Its trunk was smooth and silver-gray, almost luminous in the moonlight, and its branches spread in graceful, symmetrical curves that seemed to follow some hidden pattern of mathematical beauty. The leaves, if they could properly be called leaves, appeared to be made of some substance that captured and reflected light in extraordinary ways, sometimes appearing silver, sometimes gold, sometimes showing colors that Remy had no names for. But most remarkable of all were the fruits that hung from the tree's branches. They were perfectly round and glowed with the same gentle light that had drawn Remy through the forest. Each fruit pulsed with its own rhythm, and together they created a symphony of soft illumination that filled the clearing with magic. As Remy approached the tree, he noticed that the air around it felt different, lighter somehow, filled with possibilities that made his heart race with excitement and anticipation. The ground beneath the tree was covered with the softest moss he had ever felt, and flowers grew in perfect spirals, radiating outward from the trunk, each spiral glowing with gentle bioluminescence. At the base of the tree, carved into the silver, bark in letters that seemed to write themselves even as Remy watched, appeared words in a script he had never learned, but somehow understood. The dream tree grants what the heart truly needs to those who approach with genuine kindness. Remy read these words several times, each reading revealing new depths of meaning. He understood instinctively that this was no ordinary magic, no simple wish-granting tree that would solve problems without thought or consequence. This was something far more profound, a tree that somehow perceived the deepest needs of the heart and responded with wisdom that transcended ordinary understanding. As he stood there in the tree's presence, Remy felt all his recent worries and fears about the coming winter dissolve into a deeper awareness of what he truly needed. Yes, he needed food to survive the cold months, but that was only the surface of his deeper longing. What he truly needed was the assurance that his simple life had meaning, that his quiet acts of kindness and gentle care for his small corner of the world were part of something larger and more beautiful than he had ever imagined. The tree seemed to respond to his understanding. The light from its fruits grew slightly brighter, and a gentle breeze stirred its luminous branches, creating music like the softest wind chimes. Remy felt invited to reach out and touch the tree's smooth bark, and when he did, a warmth flowed through his small paw that spoke of connection, acceptance, and profound peace. In that moment of contact, Remy experienced something that was part vision, part dream, and part deep knowing. He saw himself not as a simple rabbit struggling to survive, but as an integral part of the forest's vast web of life. He saw how his gentle care of his garden had enriched the soil for countless small creatures, how his quiet presence had brought comfort to other forest dwellers, how his patient observation of the stars had somehow added to the forest's store of wonder and contemplation. The vision showed him that his recent troubles were not punishments or failures, but opportunities for growth and deeper connection with the mysterious forces that guided all life. The tree seemed to whisper without words that sometimes what appears to be loss is actually preparation for something far more beautiful than what came before. As this understanding settled into Remy's heart, like seeds finding perfect soil, one of the glowing fruits detached itself from a low branch and floated gently down into his waiting paws. The moment he touched it, he knew with absolute certainty that this gift would provide everything he truly needed, not just food for his body, but nourishment for his spirit and confirmation that he was exactly where he belonged in the grand design of the forest. When morning came, something felt different in the air, gentler, kinder, and full of quiet magic. Remy awakened in his own burrow as the first rays of dawn filtered through the entrance, and for a moment he wondered if his journey to the dream tree had been nothing more than an extraordinarily vivid dream. But as he sat up and stretched his small limbs, he felt the weight of something smooth and warm in his paw, and there, glowing softly in the morning light, was the luminous fruit the tree had given him. The fruit was about the size of an apple, but its skin seemed to contain depths of light that shifted and swirled like liquid starlight. As Remy held it, he felt a gentle warmth spread through his body, carrying with it a sense of deep nourishment that went far beyond mere physical sustenance. Somehow he understood that this single fruit contained everything he would need to not only survive the coming winter, but to thrive in ways he had never imagined possible. But the most remarkable thing about the gift was not its magical properties. It was the way it seemed to multiply the very act of giving. As Remy examined the fruit more closely, he realized that its magic lay not in being consumed, but in being shared. Each time he broke off a small piece and ate it, the remaining fruit seemed to regenerate itself, glowing just as brightly as before. This discovery filled Remy with a joy that had nothing to do with solving his own problems and everything to do with the possibilities for helping others. He thought immediately of old Mrs. Hedgehog, whose arthritis made foraging increasingly difficult as winter approached. He thought of the young family of field mice who had recently lost their food, stores to an early frost. He thought of all the creatures in the forest who faced their own challenges and hardships. Over the following days, Remy began to understand the true nature of the dream tree's gift. The fruit not only provided perfect nourishment for any creature who tasted it, but it also seemed to awaken in each recipient a deeper sense of connection to the forest and to each other. When he shared a small piece with Mrs. Hedgehog, her old eyes brightened with a vitality he hadn't seen in seasons, and she immediately began organizing the forest's elder creatures to share their wisdom with the younger animals preparing for their first winter. The field mice family, after receiving their portion of the magical fruit, discovered a hidden cache of seeds that had been overlooked in a hollow log. But instead of hoarding their find, they felt compelled to share it with other creatures in need, creating a network of mutual aid that spread throughout the forest like ripples in a pond. As word of Remy's gift spread quietly through the woodland community, something beautiful began to happen. Creatures who had previously minded only their own affairs started looking out for their neighbors. The squirrels began sharing not just their surplus nuts, but also their knowledge of the best foraging spots. The birds created an informal communication network, carrying news of where food could be found and which areas of the forest needed extra care. Remy realized that the dream tree had given him far more than magical sustenance. It had given him the key to transforming his entire community. The fruit's true magic lay in its ability to awaken the natural generosity that lived within every forest creature's heart, but which sometimes lay dormant under the pressures of survival and fear. Each evening, as Remy sat beneath his oak tree, sharing small portions of the glowing fruit with whoever needed it most, he felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with solving his own problems and everything to do with witnessing the flowering of kindness throughout the forest. The light of the fruit seemed to kindle corresponding lights in the hearts of all who received it, creating a web of gentle illumination that made the entire woodland feel more magical and alive. His own garden, neglected during his focus on sharing, the dream tree's gift began to show signs of mysterious renewal. The soil that Mrs. Hedgehog had declared tired and depleted started to darken and enrich itself. The withered plants began to show new growth, and even in the approaching winter, green shoots appeared where none should have been possible. Remy understood that this too was part of the tree's gift, that by focusing on the needs of others, he had somehow created the conditions for his own needs to be met in ways both practical and profound. The magic worked not through the suspension of natural laws, but through the activation of natural generosity and community care that made survival not just possible, but joyful. From that day forward, life in the forest seemed to hum with a softer kind of joy. The transformation that began with Remy's encounter with the dream tree rippled outward through the forest community in ways both subtle and profound. What had started as one rabbit's solution to a practical problem had become something much larger, a renewal of the forest's sense of itself as a place where every creature belonged and contributed to the whole. As winter settled over the woodland, with its blanket of snow and shortened days, the season that had once promised hardship became instead a time of unexpected abundance. Not material abundance. The forest was still bound by the natural cycles of scarcity and plenty, but an abundance of care, creativity, and mutual support that made even the leanest times feel rich with possibility. Remy's burrow became an informal, gathering place where creatures would stop by to share news, seek advice, or simply enjoy a moment of community warmth. The magical fruit, which continued to regenerate itself with each act of sharing, became not just a source of nourishment, but a symbol of the forest's renewed commitment to caring for all its inhabitants. Old Mrs. Hedgehog established what she called wisdom circles, where the forest's most experienced creatures shared their knowledge with younger animals. These gatherings, held in various clearings throughout the woodland, became beloved traditions where practical skills were passed down alongside stories, songs, and the kind of deep forest lore that could only be learned through generations of careful observation. The squirrel families, inspired by the spirit of sharing that had taken hold, created a forest-wide communication network they called the Acorn Post. Messages, news, and calls for help could now travel from one end of the woodland to the other in a matter of hours, ensuring that no creature's needs went unnoticed or unmet. Even the shy creatures who typically kept to themselves began to emerge from their solitude. The family of deer who lived in the deepest part of the forest started making regular visits to the more social areas, bringing with them knowledge of distant water sources and hidden groves that proved invaluable during the coldest months. Remy found that his own life had become richer in ways he had never anticipated. Where once his days had been filled with the simple routines of survival and maintenance, they now held a variety of activities that connected him to the broader forest community. He might spend a morning helping a family of chipmunks winterize their burrow, an afternoon sharing the dream tree's fruit with newcomers to the forest, and an evening participating in Mrs. Hedgehog's wisdom circles. But perhaps most remarkably, Remy discovered that his garden had not only recovered from its previous difficulties, but was thriving in ways that seemed to defy the season. Even as snow covered the forest floor, his small plot continued to produce fresh greens and vegetables that he shared freely with anyone in need. The soil had become so rich and fertile The plants grew with unusual vigor and seemed to resist the cold that typically ended the growing season. The other forest creatures began to seek Remy's advice on gardening and plant care, and he found himself teaching skills he had learned through years of quiet observation and patient practice. These informal gardening lessons, conducted in the protected space near his oak tree, became another way for the community to gather and learn from one another. As spring approached and the forest began its annual awakening, the changes that had begun during the winter became even more apparent. The woodland seemed more vibrant and alive than anyone could remember. Plants grew more vigorously, streams ran clearer, and there was a sense of harmony between all the forest's inhabitants that spoke of a community that had learned to care for itself as a unified whole. Remy often reflected on how his simple act of following a mysterious light had led to such profound changes, not just in his own life, but in the entire character of the forest community. He had sought help for his failing garden and had found something infinitely more valuable, the understanding that individual well-being and community health were inseparably connected, and that true abundance came not from what one could accumulate, but from what one could share. The dream tree's gift had taught him that magic was not separate from ordinary life, but woven into the very fabric of kindness, generosity, and mutual care. Every day now held moments of quiet wonder, small miracles, of connection and support that made even the simplest activities feel touched by something sacred and profound. And now, as night wraps its arms around the forest once more, Remy curls up in his little burrow. The forest settles into its evening rhythm with the gentle grace of a familiar lullaby. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls softly to its mate, and the sound carries through the trees like a whispered blessing. The stars that Remy has watched for so many seasons emerge one by one, taking their accustomed places in the vast, peaceful sky. In his cozy burrow beneath the crooked oak tree, Remy arranges his nest of soft moss and fallen leaves with the same care he has always shown for simple tasks. The magical fruit from the dream tree sits nearby, glowing gently in the darkness, its light soft enough to be comforting without disturbing sleep. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities to share its magic, new chances to strengthen the bond of kindness that now connect every corner of the forest. But tonight is for rest, for the deep satisfaction that comes from a day spent in service to something larger than oneself. Remy's body feels pleasantly tired from the day's activities, helping Mrs. Hedgehog organize a seed-sharing gathering, teaching a young family of rabbits about winter gardening, and spending a peaceful hour tending his own flourishing garden. As he closes his eyes, Remy's mind drifts over the events that have transformed his quiet life into something rich with meaning and connection. He thinks of the mysterious light that first drew him into the forest's heart, of the dream tree's patient wisdom, and of the way a single act of kindness had bloomed into a forest-wide renewal of care and community. The gentle sounds of the night forest create a natural symphony around his burrow. The soft whisper of wind through pine needles, the distant murmur of the stream, and the settling sounds of other creatures finding their own rest blend together into nature's most soothing
lullaby.
Each sound carries with it the assurance that all is well in this corner of the world, that every creature is safe and cared for in the embrace of the forest community. Remy's breathing slows and deepens as sleep begins to claim him. In his dreams, he sees again the silver light of the dream tree, feels again the warmth of its gift spreading through his pores. But now the light extends beyond the tree, flowing through every root and branch, every burrow and nest, connecting all the forest's inhabitants in a web of gentle radiance that pulses with the heartbeat of shared kindness. In this dreaming state, Remy understands that the magic he discovered was not something rare and extraordinary, but something that had always existed in the forest, waiting only for someone to notice it and help it grow. The dream tree had not created the capacity for kindness and community. It had simply awakened what was already there, like sunlight awakening seeds that have waited patiently in the dark earth. As sleep takes him fully, Remy's last conscious thought is one of gratitude. Gratitude for the mysterious light that had called to him on that magical evening, for the wisdom of the dream tree, and for the opportunity to discover that the simplest life could hold the deepest magic when it was lived in service to others. The forest breathes softly around his burrow, and all the creatures of the woodland rest peacefully in their various homes, connected by invisible threads of care and kindness that make every nest, every burrow, every hollow tree a part of one great, gentle community. And in this atmosphere of perfect peace and harmony, even the stars seem to shine more softly, as if they too are settling down for a night of restful dreams. As we drift gently back through the moments we've shared, remember the light, the tree, and the dream. In the soft space between waking and sleeping, let your mind wander back through Remy's gentle journey. See again the failing garden that seemed like a disaster, but was actually the beginning of something beautiful. Feel again the mysterious pull of that pearl-like light dancing between the trees, calling a simple rabbit toward magic he never expected to find. Remember the dream tree with its silver bark and glowing fruits, standing patient and wise in its circular clearing, waiting to teach the lesson that true magic lives not in the getting, but in the giving. See how one act of sharing became 2, then 10, then a forest-wide awakening of kindness that transformed every burrow, every nest, every corner of the woodland. The story circles back on itself like the seasons, like the daily rhythm of sunrise, and sunset, like the gentle breathing of a sleeping forest. Each ending becomes a new beginning. Each act of kindness plants seeds for future wonders. Each night's rest prepares the heart for tomorrow's opportunities to love and serve and share. And so Remy sleeps and the forest dreams in the dream. Tree continues its patient glow in the heart of the woodland, ready always for the next kind soul who might glimpse its light and follow its call toward magic. The story never truly ends, but simply transforms, like water becoming mist, becoming rain, becoming the stream that nourishes the roots of every growing thing. Rest now, as Remy rests, as the forest rests, in the knowledge that kindness is the most powerful magic of all, and that even the smallest act of love can light up the world with gentle radiance that never truly fades.